Hello, 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 and welcome back to Toy Thursday with Johnny Tiger on June 24th, 2021. Today we're going to run out the element series. For the past few episodes, we've been representing the five Chinese elements, or attempting to represent the five Chinese elements using various characters and action figures from my collection. Quick recap in case you have not focused on the last few episodes. In Chinese astrology, it's important to figure out which year you are born in terms of what Chinese animal you are rooster, monkey, dragon. Roosters are really cool, by the way. And you also have to figure out what element you are, because depending on your element, it makes a big difference on your personality and supposedly makes a big difference in terms of who you will get along with, who will most benefit you in your life, etc., etc., etc. And the way you figure out what element you are is by looking at the last number in your birth year. If your birth year ends with 0 or 1, then you are a metal element. If you end with 2 or 3, you are the water element. 4 and 5, wood. 6 and 7, fire. And 8 and 9 is our subject of the day, earth. The earth element is often said to get along really well with metal because earth gives birth to metal, and earth also get along great with fire because fire is said to give birth to earth. Now, note when we talk about earth here, we're not talking about the planet earth, uh, although you definitely can interpret it that way. But earth here actually means dirt, sand, rock, all the minerals in the earth itself, mud, clay, all that stuff. All those fall under the domain of earth. So, without further ado, let's get our show on the road, or shall we say, let's rock. Unlike previous episodes where I really had to struggle to find enough representative for some element, water was a definite difficult one, and wood was not that easy either. When it comes to Earth, we actually had no shortage of action figures that would be good representative of this element. A lot of you probably think I'm going to be showing you the thing from Fantastic Four. I mean, when we talk about Earth or rock or that kind of stuff, then the first, probably the most popular, most famous guy is the Thing from Fantastic Four. He's a big, rocky guy who has super strength and is really lovable. But sorry to say, I don't have any of the Fantastic Four action figures. A couple of years ago, they Hasbro came out of with the Fantastic Four series of Marvel Legends, and sadly, I didn't have the money at the time, so I totally missed out on it. And right now, I'm having a bit of a hard time trying to track that down. So, hint, hint, if you want to give me a gift, then those Fantastic Four characters are a good place to start. Another reason why I have not gotten any of the Fantastic Four in my collection is Fantastic Four is one of those teams that kind of have to go together. When I deal with collecting X-Men or Avengers, I can sometimes pick and choose. Like if I don't like Captain America, I don't need Captain America. I can still just get Thor and Iron Man. I'm nothing against Captain America, by the way. That's just an example. Because Thor and Iron Man have a lot of adventures on their own, so they can display with or without Captain America or other Avengers. Same with most of the X-Men. I don't need a Wolverine. I can do fine with, let's say, Cyclops or uh, Marvel Girl or Iceman, because they each have their own adventures for the most part. Uh, but when it comes to the Fantastic Four, it's none or all of them. So it's a little bit of a commitment. So I have not bothered to attempt to get all four characters in my collection. Our first character that represents Earth is this guy you're seeing in front of the camera. Of course, you're looking at him from the back. His name is Dr. Paul Pierre Duval. I mean, that's just such a super stereotypical French name. And yes, he is French. That is also one of the more unique thing about him. He is one of the very few French characters I have on my shelf, which actually, believe it or not, was one of the main reasons why I decided to pick him up, even though I didn't know anything about this character at the time when I purchased him. Anyway, Dr. Duval was a chemist. He was into chemistries and potions and uh, playing with different chemicals and stuff like that. And one day, while working in his lab, he accidentally spilled some kind of chemical on his right hand. And instantly, his right hand turned to stone. Later, he found out that whatever he touches with that right hand will get turned to stone for an hour before they revert back to normal. So if he touches a car, that car turns to stone. If he touches a person, that person turns to stone. If he touches a house, that house turns to stone. Uh, and an hour later, it turned back to normal state. So luckily, it doesn't last forever. And then he realized that he gained a secondary superpower when he touched himself. That just totally didn't sound the way it was supposed to. Look, get your mind out of the gutter. He touched himself, as in, he used his right hand to touch his left hand. And that's exactly what he did. Not touching himself is what some of you are thinking. I know, I can hear you guys snickering. When he touched himself with his right hand, he was able to turn himself to stone as well. However, there's a big difference. When he turned other people or other things to stone, they became just stone, statues. They couldn't move. When he turned himself to stone, he maintains all his mobility. He can move, jump, fight, and all that stuff. Plus, he gained the property of having a stone body. It's nearly indestructible, and he has superhuman strength. He can lift over 10 tons of objects. He became the supervillain known as the Grey Gargoyle. The Grey Gargoyle was, for the most part, a very low tier supervillain. Uh, he's one of those guys that you kind of just throw in to your henchmen or throw into your whatever bad guys team you're putting together if you need a little bit of extra muscle and stuff like that. He's not very powerful. Like I said, when he turned people to stone, it only lasts an hour, and his super strength is only about 10, 11 ton, which for us, that sounds like crazy amount of strength, of course, but when you're up against guys like the Hulk or Thunder God, Thor, or Spider-Man, all those heavy hitters, 10 tons is just not that much. Uh, Grey Gargoyle, that's hard to say actually. Grey Gargoyle mostly confined himself to petty robberies, and uh, he has this little scheme that he always trying to find a way to be gain immortality. He tried to be immortal. He has crossed paths with Captain Marvel and Thor and Iron Man. He did. He was able to turn Iron Man's armor into stone and defeating Iron Man that way. However, an hour later, Iron Man turned back into Iron Man and came back and kicked his butt uh, royally. So that wasn't much to brag about. One of his more gruesome crime, I think, was the one time when Grey Gargoyle decided to disguise himself as an artist, as a sculptor, and made a lot of money until the superheroes realized that he was the Grey Gargoyle in disguise. He was actually making his statues out of real people. That's why his statues were able to look so realistic because he was just turning real people to stone to make his art. So that was one of the more gruesome or disturbing crimes that Greg Gargoyle got into. Despite him being a 6 foot tall chunk of granite, gray rock, he is still dressed really rather silly. He's wearing a little domino mask to hide his face so no one's going to recognize him. Like, you're already a big granite guy. Like, how many different ways do you think people is going to recognize you? Like, do you really think wearing a mask is going to change anything when you're so distinguishable? Right? So that's silly. And he's wearing a cape like most good supervillains know. You need to have a nice looking cape to show them that you mean business. He's wearing gloves and swim trunks. Yeah, what can I say? Supervillains sometimes look really silly. Honestly, when your super ability is to turn yourself into a solid rocky dude, then I think you can pretty much skip the cape, skip the trunk, skip the glove, skip the mask. You look pretty interesting as it is. Grey Gargoyle was made by Hasbro a couple years ago, and he is sadly built on a generic, regular body. The only new piece on him are his clawed hands, his clawed feet, the cape, and of course his head. The head is really well made, actually. The head is the only part of his body that actually have that squared off angular feel of a rocky creature. The rest of his body just feel kind of organic, even though they are painted to look like gray granite. But hey, nowadays a lot of companies are cutting costs, and especially when it comes to uh, low grade supervillain that no one really cares about, like Grey Gargoyle, I can totally understand why they didn't want to spend a lot of money making new parts for him. However, he is still a solid stone creature that serves very well for opening our episode this week as a representative of the earth element. Of course, because Grey Gargoyle, like I said, is built on the generic regular body that Hasbro uses so much for their Marvel Legend line, he is super articulated. This is what's really cool about these Marvel Legend figures. The head can go forward and back, side to side, tilt side to side, shoulder forward back, side to side, swivel, bicep, squeak, squeak, elbow, double jointed elbow, I think. Maybe not. If it is, I can't get it to work. Uh, Wrist, flex in and out, turn, waist, crunches forward and back, turn side to side. Although when you turn him to the side, you can see on his waistline there's a ugly looking gap there on his waist. I don't know if it's picking up on the camera. When you turn him back normal, it's fine, but when you turn his waist, then it's gapping really ridiculously. So that just shouldn't happen on today's action figure. Uh, Legs, he can do this split, or kind of. He can kick forward and back. Legs, double jointed, maybe. Kind of. Ankle, up and down. Can do high kick, side kick, all kind of kicks. Like I said, really well articulated. Our next representative for the Earth element comes from year 1995. So this is an antique. This is an oldie, and it's quite well made actually, despite it's really seriously flawed. We'll talk about that in a bit. This rocky looking dude, his name is Slag. Slag was once upon a time a criminal mastermind, a regular human. One time, when hiding from the authority, he got covered in some kind of crazy chemical mixture that turned him into a giant pile of walking volcanic rock and able to use lava as his weapon. And then he went on to join the villains in the WILDC.A.T.S comic. For the most part, Slag is one of those generic henchmen, just big, powerful, not very bright for the most part. Uh, uh, he's the big guy that the bad guy will roll out when they need something destroyed. Luckily for the collectors, they didn't make Slag here look anything like the way he did on screen. On the cartoon, Slag just looked like a very generic big orange guy, and there wasn't a lot of details to him. Uh, but on this action figure, you can see tons of details, all these cracks, rocky details on his body, the protrusions on his back. Like this actually does feel like rock. The texture is very rocky despite it being plastic. And he's armed with a huge uh, stony club, and he has a little lump of volcanic lava. I don't know what, like, he can't really hold this. Maybe he can like balance it on his hand like that. Uh, yeah, but supposedly he can throw this at his enemy. His body looked like cooled volcanic rock with veins of lava running through all over his body. And he has a very squat and powerful build. Like I said, as a figure that was made in 1995, he is really well made, and he has articulation in his shoulder, his hips, his head, his wrist, and his waist. So he has quite a bit of articulation for something made way back then. Now, so far, I seem to sound like I really am impressed with this figure. In some ways, I am. However, I did mention that he is really flawed in a way, and I think some of you might already be able to figure out what I'm going to say. I did mention that Slag, when he got turned into this volcanic rock monster, he was gigantic. He was a giant monster, giant volcanic rock monster. Well, this action figure is anything but giant. He's quite thick. He's quite burly. Don't get me wrong, but uh, even against action figures back in 1995, he's just so-so. He's not the giant rock monster that we associate Slag with. Let me bring Grey Gargoyle back in the frame and give you guys a comparison so you know what I'm talking about. See, Grey Gargoyle. This is a Grey Gargoyle is only 6 foot tall. Uh, he's other than him being a stony, gray, stony creature, he is more or less the size of a regular large human. Slag supposed to tower over him. Like if we go by what Slag's supposed to be, Slag should probably be somewhere up here. That's how big Slag should be, but instead, Slag is like down here, barely reaching Grey Gargoyle's chest. Now, to be fair, Slag is in a bit of a crouch, as we can see by the shape of his leg. But even then, I mean, even if he was able to stand up straight, he would still only be the size of Grey Gargoyle. Too small. This is Slag is one of those characters whose really only attribute in the show was that he was a giant, brutal warrior. And this action figure does not portray him in that way. Perhaps back in 1995, toy makers just really didn't care. They didn't really pay attention to that kind of details. They just wanted to get the toys out there and, hey, if they're too short, if they're too big, whatever. Kids wouldn't know any better, so they thought. But we did. Even as children, we knew that Slag was way too small, and we were very disappointed. At least I was very disappointed. So let's talk about people from the Earth element. The Earth element, uh, their good points, their strong points are Earth element people are extremely patient. They're very good, they perform really well under pressure, and they have a lot of dedication, a lot of devotion. They are a little bit slow in reacting. They like to take time to think things out, and they are generally very good workers. Uh, However, uh, Earth people have the negative attribute that they are very inflexible. They're very difficult for them to learn new things, very difficult for them to change their ways. So they can be one of the most stubborn of the five elements. Also, sometimes they are a little bit lacking in the fun department. They are very straight-laced. They are very down to earth. So sometimes they are not necessarily the most fun or funny or humorous people to be around with. Our next representative of Earth is also from 1995. We are actually seeing two vintage antique figures in a row. Once upon a time, his name was Thomas John McCall. He was a 16-year-old underachieving geeky teenager whose only ambition was to play computer games. One day, when he was uh, in his father's lab, his father was a scientist. Yeah, you see where this is going. Uh, the kid found some new potion his dad was experimenting with, and I don't know why, but he decided it was a good idea to drink it, and it turned him into this 8 foot tall giant stone creature. Now having 600 times the strength of a normal human being, the creature now known as Bad Rock soon went on to join the government's secret superhero team, Youngblood. Even though he is this 8 foot tall giant beast of a stony creature, inside he still has the mind and immaturity of a 16-year-old teenager. That is Bad Rock, and this is his action figure. And look at that. It's a he's a beast. It's really wide, and he's decked out. He has a gray, stony flesh, and he's decked out in some golden military style armor with some bullets strapped to his arm, grenades here on his belt, and he got a pair of missile launcher on his shoulder. These hinges open, and these actually fires. I'm not going to do it on camera because they are going to go missing. I'm going to have a hard time finding them. But look at that. That's so cool. You flip open the lid on the missile launcher and they'll fire forward. This was made by McFarlane in his Spawn day back in 1995 when McFarlane was just becoming to be on top of his action figure making game, becoming the king of action figures. This is just one of those really fun figure that is packed full of details and this giant hunk of plastic. Well, he's supposed to be rock, but he made of plastic. He does, however, still suffer a little bit. Not so bad as Slag, but he does still suffer from the problem that uh, not he's not big enough because again, Bad Rock was supposed to be somewhere around 8 feet tall, and let's bring Great Gargoyle back. Great Gargoyle, like I said, is 6 feet tall, and if you stand them together, you see, yeah, they're about the same height. So that's a little bit problematic. Uh, the proper size Bad Rock would have to be somewhere like this. Looms a little bit above Great Gargoyle, like that. However, as far as the girth of the body go, it's very accurate. I mean, look at the size of the guy. Uh, his his body is twice as thick, twice as wide as the Great Gargoyle, and his hand is big enough to look at that. Look at that, posing the Great Gargoyle's head against Bad Rock's hand. Bad Rock looks like he can just grab Great Gargoyle's head in one hand like that. Right? So size-wise, he is good. He's good. He's nice and big, nice and wide. He's just not tall enough. Uh, again, I understand like back then, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to make action figures of the proper size because of how expensive they would be. And don't forget, back then action figures were mostly targeted toward children, and most action figures were like $7. If you make something like this really big, you might end up having to charge $20, and most parents wouldn't buy an action figure for their kids for $20 back then. Now nowadays, when we are dealing with mostly adult collectors, if you make this nice and big, proper size, and you charge us $5, $10 more, Oh, I buy it, no problem. So it's a different time, different crowd that you will be dealing with. Despite of the size problem, not being big enough, Rock is one of those very timeless action figure that display really well with action figures back in the old days and still displayed really well with action figures today. I mean, he's a big, stony, rocky guy who's decked out in military gear. I can totally see, even against this, even against Grey Gargoyle, who was made only 2 years ago, Bad Rock here, made back in 1995. You can see those two facing off on the shelf, like that. No problem. It's a yeah, he displays it really good. That's one of the real strength of this action figure. It's just so much fun and such a well-made. Back then, he was a very good toy. I had a lot of fun and using him for all kind of role-playing campaign. Now he makes a great display on the shelf. A big, rocky monster guy who's one of the superheroes. Speaking of big, rocky guys, who's one of the superheroes, I know, I told you I'm not going to show you the thing from the Fantastic Four, but I'm going to show you a guy who looks amazingly like the thing, especially in kind of like the way he's depicted in the movie. This big walking pile of rock, his name is Korg. He came from the planet Cronon, and he was once captured and enslaved by one of the elders of the universe called the Grandmaster. The Grandmaster threw Korg in his gladiator arena and forced Korg to fight in the arena for him. And it was there when Thor and the Incredible Hulk ran into Korg and they became friends, and then later staged a rebellion and freed all the slaves from the gladiator arena, and then went on to have other adventures together. This was the way Korg was portrayed in the Thor Ragnarok movie. Really, rather a good movie. I enjoyed it when I watched it. And Korg is a very likable character. He's a big, hulking warrior made of solid rock, and yet he has a very gentle personality, very jovial, cracks a lot of one-liners. So you can see on his face, he has a nice, innocent little smile. Despite the rest of him looking really hulking and scary, his body is mostly craggy, rocky material. He has a big disc on his chest with a massive belt, shorts, and armor plates around his parts of his body. And he got this giant club in his hand. This club, by the way, is not just something he can smash people with. There was a scene in the movie where it showed that he could use that club to fire some kind of laser. So it's some kind of laser weapon. I'm not quite sure what's that all about. Perhaps the most fun little trivia about Korg was when he rebelled with the Incredible Hulk and Thor and freed the slave. That was not the first time he tried that. The first time he tried to rebel, apparently the only people that trusted him enough to show up to join the rebellion was his mom and her boyfriend. That's why the rebellion failed the first time. Now that's just funny in all kind of ironic way. Later on, after freeing the slave, Korg joined the superheroes and went on various adventures with them, and ended up defending Earth against Thanos and alien invaders, and fought alongside the Avengers, fought alongside Captain America, and all those superheroes. In a much later scene, it was shown that Korg also had a very gentle side, very childlike side to his personality, despite of being a gladiator. There was a scene where he was shown playing video game and then getting into argument with people on the internet, and he got his feelings hurt when people started to troll him because he just didn't have the mental fortitude to deal with internet bullies. So that's really, really endearing for such a big, strong-looking, rocky, uh, kind of a monster guy. Now, this is Korg. Korg is one of the examples of how a creature like this, how a character like this is done right. He is uh, thick and wide and tall in all the right way. He's the perfect size. Let me bring Grey Gargoyle back again for comparison. Like I said, Great Gargoyle is supposed to be 6 feet tall. So as you can see, Korg standing behind Great Gargoyle, you can see Korg's upper chest and head. So Korg is roughly 8 feet tall. So this is perfect size. That's basically the right size for this guy, and he's really big and thick. If we stand them side by side, you can see how much bulkier he is comparing to Great Gargoyle, despite both of them being solid rock. Like this rock is definitely not the same size as this rock. Now let's do a final departure shot by bringing all our rocky uh, depiction, our rocky creatures, back into the frame. In the front, we have Slag on the right, Bedrock on the left, the two representatives coming from 1995. In the back, we have more modern creation, uh, Grey Gargoyle on the right and Korg on the left. I hope you guys have enjoyed these past few episodes. I definitely had fun making them, racking my brain to find enough characters to showcase the Chinese element. Next week, I'll think of something new and something uh, more strange and interesting. If you enjoyed these Toys Thursday, then please do check out the Johnny Tiger Experience podcast, where I actually have full-length action figure reviews alongside all the other good stuff that you have come to enjoy on these daily videos. Thank you, and we'll be back tomorrow for Fitness Friday.